Hey, what is up, guys? Welcome back to Life on the Wrist. Happy New Year. It is officially 2020. It's insane how quickly 2019 went by. It literally went by like that. But it is a new year. It is the first of the year. I hope you guys had a wonderful New Year celebration. I hope you guys didn't go too crazy and you started the year off on the right foot. Make sure you're thinking about those New Year's resolutions, whether they're watch related or not. It's always great to continue to try and improve yourself. So Happy New Year. Today we're going to be discussing how to tell if a watch is undervalued. This is an interesting topic that I think it definitely deserves its own video to be talked about. I'm going to give you my thoughts, kind of give you just a little diagram that I created to kind of, lead yourself into figuring out if specific watches are undervalued. So I'm going to share that with you guys. But before we get into it, I said every video, be sure to hit that like button. You guys have been excellent. I really have enjoyed the support that you guys have shown us. So be sure to hit that like button. Let's see if we can get to 20 likes like we always try to do. So I created this little diagram that kind of helps you identify if a watch is undervalued. Now, I want to disclose this at the beginning of the video. I am not suggesting that watches are a good investment. In fact, one could argue that they are actually a bad investment. It's just an interesting concept to think about. This is by no means me saying that you should invest in watches. This doesn't say that this is a foolproof exercise that I'm about to go through. You need to think about watches for yourself. I say it in the beginning. I created a video where I talked about 3 rules when it comes to collecting watches, and one of them is buy what you love. It should not be buying what you think is going to be a good investment. That's not one of the rules when it comes to collecting watches. In fact, I wouldn't even consider that type of thing when you look to collect watches. If you're buying what you love and it makes you happy, then that makes the watch of value to you. So don't consider if a watch is undervalued or if it will appreciate in value or hold value. That's not what this video is about. Or that's not what collecting is about. This video is just to give you an idea of like how you can approach the problem of trying to identify if a watch is undervalued. So I'll pop up my diagram. As you can see, I kind of created a pyramid, and this kind of goes with how I kind of would approach this question. So at the bottom, you can see there's brand provenance, which is kind of your foundation. Then you have the value of the reference, which goes into things like the aesthetics of the watch, the engineering or horological value of the watch, and then the rarity of that specific reference. And then at the top, you can see that that's the value of the specific watch, and that has to do with condition. So I thought I'd kind of run through these different categories with you, explain how this kind of goes, how this diagram kind of manifests itself and what I think about it. And I would love to hear what you guys think about this in the comment section below. And also, if there's something I missed, be sure to put in the comments that you think would be valuable for people who would end up watching this video. So at the bottom, I said that the foundational support for whether or not a watch is undervalued is brand provenance. So is the brand well known? Is the brand desired by those who are looking to buy a watch? And all of this whole concept, kind of the way I approached it was I identified some categories of what people would want to buy in a watch, what they're looking for when they're looking to buy a watch. So brand provenance is obviously big. There's the obvious cliche with saying, Rolex is obviously a really well-known brand. It's kind of become the staple for what a watch is. If someone asked you to draw a watch, it would probably be a Rolex Submariner. So brand provenance, if they have a really great history, if they've created watches that people really like and desire, then obviously that's going to be the foundational support of whether or not a watch is going to be undervalued. So if if the watch is coming from a brand that is really well known, like Rolex or Patek Philippe, that has a history of creating extremely high quality watches, and also perhaps watches that are well known and desired by people, then obviously people are going to be that's a good place to start. Look for brands that have that type of provenance. But there's also other ways that you can look at brand provenance. For example, if a watch company only produces a specific amount of watches every single year, so low production volumes, that means that there's gonna be low supply of watches. Perhaps people are gonna desire them highly, so your prices are gonna be a lot higher for those types of watches. If you can find a watch that is in low supply but probably hasn't caught on with mainstream watch collecting, then that might be a good place to start. So those types of brands should also be considered. Also, if a brand is connected with another another well-known brand. For example, I think the rise of Tudor has shown a brand in itself that is undervalued. So Rolex is obviously kind of taken off and being a real staple when it comes to watch collecting. Tudor kind of was a laggard, and people didn't really look at it. But then as they started to realize that Tudor had excellent quality pieces that aesthetically had similar design elements as Rolex watches did, they started looking at those more, and the prices of Tudors have slowly risen. Yeah, that's another great example. So if the brand itself has really great provenance, if it's connected to another brand that has great provenance, or perhaps if it's a smaller manufacturer that has that only produces a low supply of a limited amount of watches every single year, those are all factors that can really create the foundational support for a watch that may be undervalued. So there's other ways to look at brand provenance. I tried to mention a couple of them, but that's a good foundation to kind of analyze and then go from there. So if you have found a brand that has really great provenance, then you can start looking at the specific references that they make. And I think there are three main parts when it comes to valuing a specific reference. So I think the first thing is aesthetics. People who are really into movements, I'm sorry, but the first thing that you're really going to notice about a watch is how it looks, because that's the first thing that you're really analyzing, right? You're going to look at the watch and you're going to say, hey, do I like the looks of this watch? So the aesthetics are going to be a huge part of whether the reference is going to be important. As an example, there's a Patek Philippe that has Breguet numbers, and Breguet numbers have become extremely popular within vintage watch collecting. Even so, like I was looking at a Bulova that had Breguet numbers, and it was priced at way more than an average time-only Bulova actually goes for. So the aesthetics are going to be an extremely important part. Aesthetics can also have to do with case metals. So if stainless steel, I think, is a great example of the past 10 years. Stainless steel watches have increased in value tremendously just because people have become a little bit more more inclined to go for stainless steel watches as opposed to just buying precious metals. So aesthetics behind watches are huge and probably one of the main drivers when it comes to whether or not a watch is undervalued. So if you can find those characteristics of watches that are highly valued, and look and try and find them in brands with great provenance but have similar aesthetics, then you can kind of connect those two and realize that may be an undervalued reference. The next thing has to do with the engineering or horological value that you place in that watch. So as an example, I had a video that I created about the Memovox, which is a vintage Jaeger LeCoultre watch that has an alarm function and has hammers that hit the side of the case to alert someone that the alarm's going off. I kind of came to that conclusion because JLC is obviously a great brand, but also the horological aspect behind creating an alarm function like that is actually quite high. You have to be a fairly good watchmaker in order to create those watches. Also, those watches are in-house movements, so JLC created those movements. So there's a lot of, just because a watch looks good, you should also consider the horological value, because then you can get more people behind the fact that watch is undervalued. So if you can identify characteristics, again, for watches that perhaps are highly valued or perhaps overvalued, and find those in watch brands that have great provenance, have the similar design elements, and also have those types of horological features, it obviously increases the price of it. That also increases the likelihood that it's probably undervalued. And then lastly is rarity. You don't want to, watches that are created in huge masses are obviously not going to be, because there's such high supply of them, it's very easy to get a hold of them. So the value that is placed on that asset is obviously going to be lower, as opposed to if it had lower volumes of those watches that were produced. So rarity is going to be a very important thing, and that rarity there's a huge amount of value placed in rarity when it comes to vintage watches. The 1518, I think there's only the split second Rolex that John Goldberg has, I think there's only 12 of them, and I think 3 are unknown. So you can see that watch obviously rose in value just because of the rarity aspect of it. Horologically speaking, it is a split second chronograph. So there's a lot of other factors that go into that, but rarity is a huge part of whether or not a watch is undervalued. If you can find watches that are not produced in high quantities, that's going to add to the fact that it may be undervalued. So if you can value a reference that has all of these, has great aesthetics, hugely impactful when it comes to from a horological standpoint, and then obviously is rare reference that was produced in perhaps limited quantities, or perhaps there are limited quantities available to purchase it, then you're going to try and hone in on one specific watch in that reference. And in order to find that, the biggest thing is condition. This is going to be a factor that you want to determine for each specific watch that you think you may want to end up purchasing. So in order to pick that, you want to look at the condition. Now, there are a couple ways that you can look at condition. There are some watch collectors that want watches that are like new. They want it to be untouched, original dials, original everything, which I can totally see that. And I would argue that I'm kind of in the middle between these two that I'm about to describe. So I think you have to look at the reference and identify if the market is looking for like new condition in these watches. Obviously, there's going to be two separate markets for this versus the next one I'm going to speak about, but that's one way that you can look at condition. Another way is there's some collectors that like watches that have a little bit of age to it, that show that they've been worn, and you can see the patina in that specific watch. And that's a completely different market than the market for like new condition watches. So identifying what type of condition that specific reference is desired at, and then figuring out, trying to identify that condition in that reference and finding a specific watch to purchase that with that type of condition is going to be your next step. So that's kind of the way I would run through it. So I'll take John Goldberger's or Auro Montanari's split-second Rolex chronograph that was only made in 12 examples. There's 9, I think, currently known. So I'll take that as a just to kind of show you the way in which I would look at this. Obviously, that is probably valued at just about where it should be. It's not an undervalued reference, but brand Provenance, it came from Rolex. Rolex is known for creating extremely high quality timepieces and extremely desired by just about any type of watch collector. So great foundation for that watch. Moving into the value of the specific reference, the aesthetics, it's extremely classic. It kind of takes you back to, it makes you reminisce of, earlier years, back in, the 20th century watchmaking, all those types of kind of historical moments within the existence of the world. So it has those kind of classical aesthetics, which a lot of people, there's a huge market for, especially when you look at recent releases, a huge market for those historical design elements. Engineering wise, it's a split-second chronograph. That in itself is an extremely hard thing for a watchmaker to make, watchmaker to work on. So split-second chronographs hugely valuable when it comes to horologically speaking. And then obviously Rarity, there's only 9 that are known, 9 out of 12. So your Rarity is going to be insanely high. And then lastly, condition. John Goldberger is known for buying watches with a little bit of patina, but they are in good quality standing. So that's kind of the way in which that watch would kind of flow through our pyramid that we've created here. So I hope this is kind of helpful to help you kind of think about if you are into collecting watches and you're looking to find watches that are undervalued. Again, I do not suggest buying watches just because they are undervalued and perhaps may increase in value. And watches are basically tools to tell time. They're not supposed to be an investment tool. Obviously, there are some watches that have increased in value, and I think that's just the luck of the draw. I would say buy what you love. I say it every single time I talk about this type of thing. Buy what you love. Don't buy what everyone else is saying that you should buy. If you don't enjoy the piece, then you're not going to enjoy the time with it. Sorry, my chronograph just stopped. I apologize. Definitely buy what you love. If the watch ends up increasing in value, that's great. But this is the way in which I would kind of look at whether or not a watch is undervalued. There are a lot of watches that are out there that haven't been discovered. I think right now with the fact that everyone has access to the internet and so much information, it's hard to find those watches, and that's just kind of part of the hunt. And I think it's kind of exciting to find a watch that perhaps people haven't really seen or really placed a lot of value in, and perhaps bring it to light and help people kind of identify with it. So I hope you find this kind of pyramid diagram useful. I wrote a blog post where I kind of explain this. It's in the description in our blog. So if you haven't seen our website, be sure to go over there. If you've made it this far and you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button. Also, do not forget to hit the subscribe button. It's right by the like button, so you might as well hit it. Thank you for the support in 2019. We've had such a great year. I've enjoyed every moment of it. I'm excited to see where this channel goes in 2020. you know, I hope that these videos are helpful for you. If there's something that you think I should look at or focus on in 2020, let me know, because I want to make videos for you guys that are going to be helpful for you. So if there is something you want me to discuss and kind of give you my 2 cents on, be sure to put it in the comment section below. And with that said, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time.